June 13th. Isn't this the perfect day to meet? Grab a coffee and let's get smarter together. So, the reason a religion exists is a quirk of the human mind. We are the sole creator of our model of the world and self. We identify strongly with the self, even once we realize that we are a vessel that can create the self best suitable to meet the moment. But we perceive the intelligence that maintaining and updating the model of the world in which the self interacts in as something coming from outside of us. The model of the world changes depending on the frame we are thinking with. The frame we use is determined by the selection of data used by the nervous system to create the model. The nervous system makes its selection from a plethora of available data about the physical universe inside our intercellular network. Any change in the selection highlights different observations, different snapshots of the spectrums of a possible constantly happening all at once. This way, we become aware of different functionalities of the same thing, different uses and those possible paths to solutions for which the self as an actor in this world is then custom made. The changes in the model make it so that each world seems to be maintained and updated by a different intelligence, still our own, but feels completely different. They were sooner or later associated with gods and goddesses. The frames we are thinking with inhibit each other once they are in place, as there's always only a certain amount of data our nervous system can process at once to generate a model of the world. But we can switch between frames using one after the other with the help of triggers. Taste, sound, sense, movement, sights, etc. It's an active, intentional act that involves awareness. What's rare? At least today, and that's the only point in time we have research data for, we cruise through the vast majority of our lifetime on autopilot. How sad. So, it doesn't come as a surprise that in what we think of as pagan religions, the gods and goddesses needed to first be made aware of a human's existence before then this human had to work to make the gods and goddesses interested in them and the problems he needed to be solved. The person had to find and use the right trigger while they ask the right question and then search for what could be considered the answer of the deities. The person had to explore and figure out what had changed, what they are now aware of they hadn't been before. That's a perfect description of how the human mind works, wrapped in a story, because stories get stuck in our brain and we remember them. That's the reason why we tell stories to our kids at night in bed. How to appeal to a deity changed radically with the advent of monotheistic religions. Now, this one god was omniscient. Everything male was considered as a trigger for focus and concentration needed to reproduce existing knowledge. And in monotheistic religions, the whole story has already been written, and God is only recalling the plan as humans live it out. Therefore, this God is male. He knew about every living creature and knew exactly their hassles and their worries. Sounds lovely. I heard this transformation explained as an adjustment to the new realities of land-owning elites who couldn't at once supervise their whole property anymore. But everyone working, it needed constant supervision, as without it they would be lazy and unreliable. What a worldview. The new version of God was therefore created as a means of additional supervision. Invisible, ever-present eyes replacing the real eyes of the owner. But the afterlife with a possibility of punishment and hell was a later introduction. So what consequences would the supervision yield before that? It never made sense to me. What does is to regard the transition from uninterested but helpful to omniscient as the result of Uber explorers' need to vilify exploration. Uber explorers started out as people protesting advancing standardization of life activities like the introduction of whales that turned the exploring fish hunt, an adventure, into the exploiting fish harvest, a core. Their protest was justified. The progress of standardization blunts humankind's best tools, our combination of body and mind that allows us to randomize our searches despite time and metabolic restraints, and our inert urge to cooperate in huge networks. The more we exploit instead of exploring, the less our species remains viable. But to find recognition, the protest became an identity, a standardization in and of itself. To live out what their identity required, like no conduct of any standardized work ever, constant need to present novelty and uniqueness, constant need to lavish their retainers with gifts and adventures, and to shame allied Uber explorers with the size of their largesse. Just to touch on some highlights, Uber explorers needed about everyone else to stop exploring. Exploring is risky for the individual, a risk that is offset in a big cooperative network. Inside the network, profits are shared to the degree that everyone is comfortably provided for and unafraid to continue taking the risk of exploring. Exploring still left those who were successful in their exploration with more than the unsuccessful. But this more would never end up in the pockets of an Uber explorer, as despite their name, Uber explorers at this point had long ceased to do any exploring, but acted out a useless standard. Exploiting of existing knowledge yields far less payoff than exploring, because the old solution will never quite fit the ever-changing complex system we are all part of. But the less payoff will appear somewhat reliable at the same place the knowledge is employed. It's easy to be siphoned off by the Uber explorers, and far less needs to be shared, as Uber exploiters only need to function and not feel well, nor do they need to know things beyond the standards of their work. So, how do you tell everyone else to stop exploring and start exploiting for your benefit? They tried violence, but that got people only asking where humankind took the wrong turn, and with all those philosopher types running around, at least one with some influence was bound to realize that the introduction of an Uber explorer identity was there. Uber explorers had to preempt this, so they turned to the root, to the stories with which everyone was taught why and how to explore. Humans needed to appeal to the deity to catch their interests via triggers? Not anymore. In reality, God had always been aware of everything. An appeal was therefore useless. What God has foreseen to happen, happened. What he wanted someone to know, the people would learn at the right time. Nothing to do but work in the place God has put you. Explore, as known as think. Make a habit out of thinking. Let's turn thinking into the norm again. Like, comment, share and follow lest you miss a single opportunity to improve yourself and society. Once you do, we'll meet again at the coffee pot.